I came home unannounced that afternoon, thinking it would take 10 minutes at most. I had forgotten the folder on my desk. That was it. No warning. No call. No reason to suspect anything was off. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. The kind that presses against your ears and makes your chest tighten before your mind catches up. "Sophie," I called out. No answer. Then I heard it. A sound from upstairs. Low. Rhythmic. Out of place. I told myself it was the TV. It had to be. But my body didn't believe it. My feet slowed on the stairs, each step heavier than the last, like something inside me was already bracing for impact. The bedroom door was half open. I pushed it, and everything stopped. My husband, Daniel, was in our bed, with another woman. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, because the moment he looked at me, his face went completely pale. Not the kind of pale you get when you're caught cheating. No, this was different. This was the kind of pale that comes from fear. Real fear. The kind that has nothing to do with being exposed and everything to do with what comes next. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just betrayal. This was something much worse. I stood there, my hand still on the door, trying to process what I was seeing. The woman scrambled first, grabbing the sheet, pulling it over herself like that would erase the situation. She looked younger than me, composed, even in panic. Later, I would learn her name was Lauren, 32, product manager. But right then, she was just a stranger in my bed. Daniel didn't move. That was the second thing that felt wrong. He didn't jump up, didn't try to explain, didn't even pretend to be sorry. He just stared at me. "Frozen?" "Amanda," he said, my name catching awkwardly in his throat. I didn't answer, because something was off. Not just the obvious. Not the affair. Not the woman. Not even the fact that I had walked into it. Something deeper. Something I couldn't explain yet. Lauren slid off the bed, avoiding my eyes. "I should go," she muttered. Daniel didn't stop her. Didn't even look at her. The front door slammed downstairs a few seconds later, echoing through the house. Silence returned. Heavy. Suffocating. I stepped into the room slowly. Daniel finally moved. Sitting up, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to catch up to reality. "I can explain," he said. Of course he could. Men always think they can explain things like this. But I wasn't listening, because that feeling hadn't gone away. It was stronger now. I glanced around the room. Sheets twisted. Clothes on the floor. The air still thick with something I didn't want to name. And then I saw it. On the nightstand. A small bottle. No label. I frowned. "What is that?" I asked quietly. Too quietly. Daniel reacted immediately. "Nothing," he said, reaching for it. "Just vitamins. Vitamins." I looked at him. "Since when do you take vitamins without labels?" A pause. A small one. But enough. "I just got them recently," he said. Too fast. Too careless. I took a step closer. Daniel swallowed. "In my classroom. I saw this every day. Students trying to lie their way out of something they didn't prepare for. The same pattern. The same mistakes. They rushed. They filled in gaps with weak answers. They forgot that consistency mattered more than speed. Daniel was doing all three. I crossed my arms slowly, studying him. "From where?" I asked. Another pause. "I don't remember," he said. Wrong again. The silence between us stretched. He knew it. I knew it. This wasn't going the way he expected. Because I wasn't reacting the way he expected. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I wasn't asking why. I was watching, and that unsettled him more than anything else could have. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I asked finally. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "It's not what it looks like." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Everything about this moment should have been chaotic. But it wasn't. It felt controlled. Too controlled. And that was the third thing that didn't make sense. Because if this was just an affair, why did he look like he was about to lose everything? My phone vibrated in my hand. The sound cut through the room like a blade. I glanced down. Unknown number. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But something in my chest tightened again. That same instinct. That same quiet warning. I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then a voice. Calm. Professional. Is this Amanda Carter? This is Memorial Hospital. We need you to come in immediately. It's about your daughter. Everything inside me went cold. I didn't look at Daniel. I didn't ask questions. I didn't wait for explanations. I just turned and walked out. Because in that moment, one thing became clear. Whatever I had just walked into upstairs was only the beginning. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I remember red lights blurring past me. But I don't remember stopping. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. But I don't remember letting go. Everything felt distant, like I was watching myself from somewhere outside my body. It's probably nothing. I kept telling myself, kids get sick. Hospitals overreact. But the voice in my head didn't believe it. By the time I reached Memorial Hospital, my chest felt tight, like I had been holding my breath the entire way. The sliding doors opened with a soft mechanical sound, and I rushed inside. The smell of antiseptic hitting me instantly. I need the ICU, I said to the front desk, my voice sharper than I intended. The nurse behind the desk didn't ask questions. She just stood up. That scared me more than anything else. Another nurse appeared and motioned for me to follow her. We moved quickly down a long hallway. Her footsteps steady. Controlled. Too controlled. Like this was routine. Like this wasn't unusual. Like this wasn't something that should terrify me. And then I saw it. The glass doors. The machines. The faint, rhythmic beeping that seemed to echo through everything. My heart dropped. No, I whispered under my breath. The nurse pushed the door open. And there she was. Sophie. My daughter lay in the hospital bed. Her small body barely visible under the wires and tubes surrounding her. A mask covered part of her face. And her chest rose and fell in a slow, uneven rhythm that didn't look natural. For a second, I couldn't move. My legs felt weak, like they might give out beneath me. I reached for the edge of the doorway to steady myself. No. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. I forced myself forward, each step heavier than the last. Sophie, I said, my voice breaking. She didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even flinch. My throat tightened, panic rising in my chest. And then I saw him, Daniel, sitting in the chair beside her bed, looking at his phone. Calm, too calm. I stopped walking. For a moment, I just stared at him, waiting for him to stand up, to rush toward me, to explain, to break. He didn't. He glanced up slowly, like my presence was just another detail in the room. Oh, you're here. That was it. No urgency, no relief, no panic, just a statement. Something inside me shifted. What happened? I asked, my voice trembling despite everything. Daniel shrugged slightly. She had a reaction. Probably something she ate. A reaction. I turned to the nurse, my eyes searching for something, anything that made sense. What kind of reaction? The nurse hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. We're still running tests, she said carefully. But her breathing was compromised when she arrived. Breathing compromised. The words echoed in my head. I looked back at Sophie, at the machines, at the unnatural stillness of her body, and then I looked at Daniel again. Still calm, still detached. Where were you? I asked. He blinked. What? When this happened, I was home, he said. Too quickly. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. That feeling came back. The same one from the bedroom. Wrong. Everything about this was wrong. I stepped closer to Sophie, brushing a strand of hair away from her forehead. Her skin was warm, but there was no reaction. No sign that she could feel me. She's going to be okay, Daniel said behind me. The words sounded empty, like he had practiced them, like he knew he was supposed to say them, but didn't actually believe them. I turned slowly. How do you know that? A pause. They said she's stable, but no one had said that. I knew it. And he knew it too. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. A doctor entered a moment later, breaking it. Mrs. Carter. I turned toward him. Yes, I'm Dr. Reynolds, he said. We've stabilized your daughter for now, but we're concerned about what caused this. My heart pounded harder. What do you mean? He glanced briefly at Daniel, then back at me. There are substances in her system that don't match a typical allergic reaction. The room went still. I didn't look at Daniel. I didn't need to, because I already knew. The bottle. The unmarked bottle on the nightstand. My fingers curled slightly at my side. What kind of substances? I asked. We're waiting on full toxicology results. Doctor, Reynolds said. But initial indicators suggest a sedative. A strong one. A sedative. My mind snapped back to the bedroom. Daniel's face. Pale. Not guilty. Terrified. Because he already knew. He had known before I walked in. I finally turned to look at him. Really look at him. And this time I saw it. Not calm. Not control. Fear. Buried deep beneath everything else. Fear of something bigger than being caught. What did you give her? I asked quietly. Daniel's eyes widened. I didn't give her anything, he said immediately. Too fast. Always too fast. The doctor shifted slightly, sensing the tension but not stepping into it. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said. A lie. My first instinct wasn't to fight him. It was to understand him. Because whatever had happened, it didn't start here. It didn't start in this hospital room. It started before I walked into that bedroom. And the man sitting across from me was no longer someone I could trust. Not as my husband. Not as the father of my child. I turned back to Sophie, taking her hand gently in mine. I'm here, I whispered. Her fingers didn't move, but I held on anyway. Behind me, Daniel shifted in his chair, restless, uneasy, and for the first time since I had arrived, I wasn't overwhelmed by fear. I was focused, because something had changed. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was watching, and I was starting to see the pattern. Whatever the truth was, it was already there, hidden, waiting. And I was going to find it. I didn't sleep that night. Not in the stiff chair beside Sophie's bed. Not under the cold, fluorescent lights that never dimmed. Not with the steady beeping of machines reminding me, second by second, how fragile everything had become. I sat there and watched her chest rise and fall, counted every breath without meaning to, memorized the warmth of her hand in mine like it might disappear if I let go. And behind me, I could feel Daniel, not moving, not speaking, just there, like a shadow that didn't belong. At some point, I stood up. I need coffee, I said quietly. He nodded. Too quickly. Relief. There it was again. I stepped out of the room, letting the door close softly behind me. But I didn't go far. I stopped just outside, pressing myself lightly against the wall near the small glass panel, and I waited. 5 seconds. Then I leaned just enough to see inside. Daniel had already pulled out his phone, typing. Fast. His posture had changed completely. No longer calm. No longer detached. Now he looked tense. Urgent. Focused in a way that didn't match a man sitting beside his unconscious child. I watched him for a few more seconds. The way his shoulders tightened. The way his fingers moved quickly across the screen. The way he kept glancing toward the door. Then I stepped back. Before he could see me, my heart wasn't racing anymore. It had settled into something colder, something steadier. Because I understood now. That calm he showed me, it wasn't real. When I walked back in, holding a cup I didn't remember getting, he looked up immediately. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just tired?" He gave a small smile. Relief again. Always relief. That was his tell. I sat down across from him. And this time, I decided to test him. "What exactly did she take?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "Just for a second." "Cough syrup," he said. "I told you." "Which one?" A pause. "I don't remember the brand." I tilted my head slightly. "You gave it to her, but you don't remember the brand." His jaw tightened. She was coughing. I just grabbed something from the cabinet. I watched him carefully. Every word, every movement. "You know," I said slowly, "Sophie hasn't had a cough in over a week." Silence. It landed exactly where I needed it to. Daniel blinked, looked away, didn't respond. And that was it. That was the moment the first lie cracked. Not because of what he said, but because of what he couldn't say next. A nurse entered the room, checking Sophie's vitals, adjusting the IV line with quiet efficiency. The interruption broke the tension, but it didn't erase it. If anything, it made everything sharper, more defined. I stood up. "I'm going to talk to the doctor again," I said. Daniel nodded, but he didn't meet my eyes. Of course he didn't. Because he knew I was getting closer. Out in the hallway, I found Dr. Reynolds reviewing a chart. "Doctor," I said. He looked up. "Yes." "I need you to be honest with me." He studied me for a moment. "We always are." I shook my head slightly. "No. I need you to tell me what you're not saying." A pause. Then he exhaled slowly. "The levels in her system are higher than we'd expect from accidental ingestion," he said. My chest tightened. But I didn't react. "How high?" He hesitated. "High enough that we're considering intentional exposure." Intentional? The word hit harder than anything else. Not accident. Not mistake. Intentional. I nodded once. "Could she have taken it herself?" "No," he said immediately. Simple. Final. No room for doubt. I felt something inside me settle into place. Cold. Sharp. Focused. Because now, this wasn't confusion anymore. It was direction. I turned and walked back toward Sophie's room, each step slower than the last, because I wasn't walking back as the same person. When I pushed the door open, Daniel looked up instantly, searching my face, trying to read me, the same way I had been reading him. But this time, I gave him nothing. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and smiled. A small, controlled smile. The kind that doesn't belong in a hospital room. "What did the doctor say?" he asked carefully. I met his eyes. "They're still not sure," I replied. A lie. My first real one. And I watched what happened next. His shoulders dropped slightly. His breathing eased. Relief. Again. Always relief. That was the pattern. That was how I would break him. Because now I knew something he didn't. He thought he was ahead of me. He thought he still had time. But the truth was, I had already seen enough. And from this point on, every word he said, every move he made, was going to lead me exactly where I needed to go. Morning didn't feel like morning. The lights in the ICU never changed. But something in the air it felt tighter. Quieter. Like everyone was waiting for something no one wanted to say out loud. Sophie hadn't woken up. Not once. I stood beside her bed, holding her hand, tracing the small curve of her fingers like I could anchor her here if I tried hard enough. "You're okay," I whispered. But my voice didn't believe me. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn right away. I already knew who it was. "Daniel, why didn't you call us sooner?" His mother's voice cut through the room, sharp and controlled. I turned slowly. Patricia stood just inside the doorway, perfectly composed. Her coat still draped over her shoulders like she had walked into a meeting instead of a crisis. Behind her, Melissa hovered close, eyes scanning the room quickly before settling on me. Not on Sophie. Oh, meh. I just got here yesterday, I said calmly. Patricia's expression tightened. Well, maybe if you were home more often, things like this wouldn't happen. There it was. Not even a minute. Melissa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound softer. But not softer in intent. Sophie is a child. Amanda. Kids don't just end up like this unless someone is careless. Careless. The word landed harder than it should have. For a second, something rose in my chest. Anger. Grief. The instinct to defend myself. But I didn't. Not anymore. I let it sit. Because reacting would only give them what they wanted. Daniel stood behind them, silent, watching. Not correcting them, not stopping them. That silence told me everything. Patricia moved toward Sophie's bed, brushing her hand lightly over Sophie's arm. Oh, sweetheart, she murmured. But it didn't feel real. It felt rehearsed. Like she knew what she was supposed to say, not what she actually felt. Then she turned back to me. Tell me exactly what happened. I held her gaze. You should ask your son. The room went still. Melissa let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Seriously? You're going to blame him? I didn't say anything, I replied evenly. But you implied it. Daniel finally spoke. It was an accident. Same words. Same tone. Like he had memorized them. Patricia nodded immediately. Of course it was. Daniel would never do anything to hurt his own child. Of course. Certainty without evidence. Loyalty without question. I tilted my head slightly. Then how do you explain the sedative in her system? Patricia's expression flickered. Just for a second. Then it hardened again. Doctors make mistakes, she said quickly. Melissa nodded. Exactly. You're jumping to conclusions. Jumping. Like I was unstable. Like I was overreacting. Like I wasn't standing in a room where my daughter was connected to machines. I let the silence stretch, long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then I spoke. Interesting, I said quietly. Because the doctor sounded pretty sure. Daniel shifted behind them. A small movement. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. Patricia didn't. Melissa didn't. But I did. Because now I was watching everything. Look, Melissa said, stepping closer, her tone softening just enough to sound reasonable. We're all stressed. Let's not turn this into something it's not. Something it's not. I almost smiled, because that was exactly what they were doing. Rewriting the situation, framing it in a way that protected Daniel and pushed me into the role of the problem. I had seen this before. Not in families, but in classrooms. When a group of students quietly agreed on a version of events that wasn't true, just to protect one of their own. The difference was, this time, the stakes weren't detention. They were life and death. A nurse entered the room, her presence cutting through the tension. Visiting hours are limited in ICU, she said gently. Patricia turned to her with a tight smile. We're family. The nurse nodded, but her eyes lingered on me for a moment. Like she saw something, like she understood something wasn't right here. Good. That made two of us. Patricia turned back to Daniel, placing a hand on his shoulder. You need to stay strong, she said. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. Her eyes flicked toward me when she said it. Message received, Melissa added quietly. We'll handle this. You don't have to deal with everything alone. Handle this. That phrase stayed with me. Because it didn't sound like support. It sounded like control. Like they were already planning something. I looked at Daniel again. Really looked at him. And this time, I saw more than fear. I saw pressure. Like he was being pushed. From both sides. By them. By me. By something else I still couldn't see. And suddenly, this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It wasn't just about betrayal. This was something bigger, layered, structured. I stepped back slightly, creating space, physically, emotionally, strategically, because now I understood the shift. It wasn't just me against Daniel. It was me against all of them. And maybe against something even worse. I turned back to Sophie, wrapping my fingers gently around hers. "I'm here," I whispered. But the words weren't just for her. They were for me. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Not until I understand what really happened. Not until I see the full picture. Not until every lie falls apart. By the second day, I stopped asking questions out loud. Not because I didn't have them, but because I already knew no one in that room was going to give me the truth. So instead, I started collecting it myself. Sophie hadn't woken up. The machines still breathed for her, still monitored every fragile sign of life like she couldn't be trusted to do it on her own. The word stable had been repeated enough times that it had lost meaning. Stable didn't mean safe. Stable just meant not gone. I sat beside her, holding her hand, feeling the faint warmth of her skin. Behind me, I heard Daniel shift in his chair, restless, not grieving, restless. That difference mattered. "Do you want anything?" he asked. I didn't turn. No. Silence settled again. Heavy. Familiar. Then his phone buzzed. He stood up almost immediately. "I'm going to take this," he said. Of course he was. I nodded without looking at him. The door closed behind him, and the moment it did, I moved. Not quickly. Not urgently. Carefully. I picked up my phone and opened our bank account. I hadn't checked it in weeks. Maybe longer. Because I trusted him. Because I thought dividing responsibilities meant we were working together. Because I believed we were on the same side. The screen loaded. At first, everything looked normal. Balances. Transactions. Nothing obvious. But I didn't stop there. I scrolled. Then I scrolled again. And that's when I saw it. Small withdrawals. Not large enough to trigger alerts. Not dramatic enough to stand out. But consistent. Regular. Intentional. My fingers slowed as I moved further back. Weeks. Months. The pattern didn't disappear. It grew. The amounts increased gradually. Just enough to stay unnoticed. Just enough that someone who wasn't paying attention wouldn't question it. But I was paying attention now. I opened the transaction details. Different destinations. Different accounts. Some labeled vaguely, others not labeled at all. And then I found something that made my breath catch. A transfer. Larger than the others. Recent. Still pending. I tapped it. No description. No clear recipient. Just numbers. Cold. Empty. Anonymous. I stared at it for a moment. Then I locked my phone. Slowly. Carefully. Because reacting would be a mistake. And mistakes were something I couldn't afford anymore. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn right away. I placed my phone gently in my lap. Then I looked at him. Daniel was watching me. Not casually. Not absent-mindedly. Watching. "What?" he asked. I shook my head. Nothing. A lie. But he needed to believe it. Because as long as he thought I didn't know, he would keep moving. And movement meant information. A nurse stepped in, adjusting Sophie's IV line. "Any changes?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. Still waiting on full toxicology. Waiting. Everything was waiting. Except whatever Daniel had already set in motion. That was moving. I turned back to Sophie, brushing my thumb lightly over her hand. "You're strong," I whispered. Behind me, Daniel sat down again. Too still. Too controlled. Like he was trying to disappear into the background. And suddenly, everything connected. The bedroom. The bottle. The hospital. The money. This wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It was a sequence. A chain of decisions that had been building long before I walked through that door. And Daniel, he wasn't just caught in it. He was part of it. Maybe not in control, but involved. That much was clear. And then another thought slipped into place. Quiet. Dangerous. What if he wasn't the one in charge? What if someone else was? The idea settled in my mind, heavy and undeniable, because the fear I had seen in his face, that wasn't just guilt. That was pressure. Fear of consequences. Fear of something outside this room, outside this marriage. I looked at him again, not as my husband, not as the father of my child, but as a piece of something larger, a variable, one I didn't fully understand yet, but one I would, because now I had something I didn't have before, a pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can predict what comes next. I leaned back in my chair, my expression calm. You should get some rest, I said. He frowned slightly. I'm fine. I know, I replied softly, and I smiled. Not because anything was okay, but because he didn't realize what had just changed. He thought he was still ahead of me, still managing the situation, still in control. But the truth was, I had just stepped into his world, and from this point on, I wasn't going to miss a single detail. By the third night, I stopped pretending this was just about an affair. Affairs were messy, emotional, predictable. This had structure, and structure meant intent. Daniel stepped out again. Same pattern. Phone in hand. Quick glance at me before leaving, like he was checking whether I was paying attention. I kept my eyes on Sophie. Still, quiet, unmoving. Only when the door closed did I shift. Not to follow immediately. That would be obvious. I counted to 5, then 10. Then I stood, slowly, carefully, and walked out. The hallway was quieter this late. Fewer nurses, fewer voices, just the soft hum of machines and distant footsteps. I moved in the opposite direction first, then turned, not toward him directly, toward the stairwell, because that's where people go when they don't want to be heard. I slowed as I approached the corner, and then I heard his voice. Low, tight. I told you I'm handling it. A pause. I stayed just out of sight, close enough to hear, far enough not to be seen. No. She doesn't know. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost feel the tension in it. You said I had more time. Time. That word settled into me like something heavy, because it confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deadline, a timeline, something already in motion before I walked into that bedroom. I stepped back quietly before he could turn. My heart was steady now. Not racing. Not panicked. Focused. Because the picture was becoming clearer. Daniel wasn't just hiding something from me. He was answering to someone, and that changed everything. When I returned to Sophie's room, I made sure everything looked exactly the same. Same chair, same position, same expression. When Daniel walked back in a minute later, he studied me for a moment, searching, trying to read me. What did I miss? He asked. Nothing, I said. And again, relief. That was his pattern. That was how I would control this. Later that night, I asked him something simple. Do you still have access to your work accounts? He frowned. Yeah. Why? I might need some insurance documents, I said. Just in case. A reasonable answer. Logical. Harmless. He nodded slowly. Sure. But something in his eyes shifted. Subtle. Suspicion. Good. That meant I was close to something real. That meant there was something there worth protecting. Hours passed. The hospital grew quieter. Daniel eventually fell asleep in the chair, head tilted slightly, breathing slow, for the first time in days. Still, I waited. Not immediately. Patience mattered. When his breathing settled into a deeper rhythm, I moved, carefully. I picked up his phone, not to unlock it. Not yet. Just to observe. The screen lit up softly. Notifications. Patterns. Names. And then I saw it. A contact. Saved simply as L. Not Lauren. Just L. Hidden. Minimized. Designed not to draw attention. But I was already looking for patterns. And this one didn't belong. I didn't open it. That would come later. Instead, I studied the frequency. Multiple messages. Short bursts. Gaps between them. Like conversations that had to stay controlled. Then the screen flickered. A message preview appeared for just a second. Did you send it? I froze. Send what? Money. Information. Something else. My mind moved quickly, connecting everything I had seen so far. The missing funds. The calls. The urgency. The timeline. This wasn't just debt. This wasn't just bad decisions. This was leverage. Someone had something on him, and they were using it. Blackmail. The word settled into place with a clarity that made everything colder. And Lauren, she wasn't just the affair. She was part of the system. The connection. The bridge between Daniel and whoever was on the other end of those calls. That realization shifted everything again. Because now Daniel wasn't just the one hiding something. He was also being controlled. A participant, but not the one in charge. I looked at Sophie. Still unmoving. Still silent. And a new question formed. What had she seen? Because whatever it was, it had been enough to put her here. Enough to push Daniel into panic. Enough to involve someone else entirely. And that meant the truth wasn't just hidden. It was being protected. By more than one person. By something organized. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it. No trace. No disturbance. Then I sat back down. Hands folded in my lap. Expression calm. Because now I understood something critical. This wasn't about confronting Daniel. Not yet. If I pushed too soon, he would shut down. Erase everything. Disappear into whatever system he had gotten himself into. No. I needed him to feel safe. Safe enough to keep moving. Safe enough to make mistakes. Safe enough to believe I was still behind. Because that's when people reveal the most. When they think they've already won. I looked at him again. Sleeping. Unaware. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't see him as my husband. I saw him as part of a structure. One I was about to dismantle. Piece by piece. Carefully. Completely. Because now there was no doubt left. This wasn't just betrayal. This was something much bigger. And I was already too far in to turn back. By the fourth day, uncertainty disappeared. Not completely, but enough that what remained wasn't confusion anymore. It was direction. Sophie hadn't woken up, but her condition hadn't worsened either. The machine still worked in quiet rhythm, steady and indifferent, like none of this was personal. But everything about this was personal. I saw it in the way the nurses spoke softer when they entered the room, in the way they avoided direct eye contact when Daniel was present, in the way Dr. Reynolds paused, just slightly longer than necessary, before speaking. That pause told me everything. Something had changed. Mrs. Carter, he said gently, stepping inside. Do you have a moment? Daniel stood immediately. I'll stay. No, I said calmly. He froze. Just like that. The shift was subtle, but real. Sit, I added. And this time, he did. Out in the hallway. Dr. Reynolds didn't waste time. The toxicology report came back, he said. I nodded. Tell me. He hesitated. Just long enough to confirm what I already knew. It wasn't a common substance, he said. It's a prescription-grade sedative. Strong. Not something a child would have access to on their own. My chest tightened. But I didn't react. How strong? He exhaled slowly. Strong enough that the amount in her system would require intentional administration. Intentional. The word didn't echo this time. It settled. Cold. Permanent? Could she have taken it herself? I asked. No. Simple. Final. No doubt left. I nodded once. Thank you. When I walked back into the room, Daniel looked up immediately. Searching. Always searching. What did he say? he asked. I sat down slowly. They're still analyzing, I said. A lie. And again, relief. Too fast. Too visible. That was his pattern. Relief meant he thought he was safe. And every time he felt safe, he made mistakes. I leaned forward slightly. Walk me through yesterday, I said. His eyes flickered. What? From the moment you woke up to when Sophie collapsed. A pause. Then he started talking. Morning. Breakfast. Routine. Words flowing in a steady, practiced rhythm. But I wasn't listening to the story. I was listening to the gaps. He skipped time. Blurred details. Avoided specifics. Every inconsistency stood out now. Sharp. Obvious. Predictable. Because liars don't create chaos. They create patterns. And I was starting to see his clearly. I nodded as if I believed him. As if I was still trying to understand. But inside, I was mapping it. Every contradiction. Every missing piece. And then something shifted. A thought. Small at first. Then impossible to ignore. This wasn't about hurting Sophie. Not directly. This was about control. Timing. Silence. He needed her unconscious. Out of the way. Because she had seen something. Something he didn't want her to remember. The realization hit harder than anything else. Because it changed the motive. This wasn't desperation. This was prevention. I looked at him again. Really looked at him. And suddenly, the bedroom scene made sense. The timing. The panic. The pale face. It wasn't about me catching him cheating. It was about me arriving. Too early. Before he could finish what he had started. My fingers tightened slightly in my lap. What time did she start feeling sick? I asked. He hesitated. Then answered. Too fast. Too clean. Wrong again. I nodded slowly. Okay. That was all I said. Because I didn't need more. Not from him. Not right now. I leaned back in my chair. My voice soft. Controlled. You must be exhausted. He frowned slightly. I'm fine. I'm sure you are. I gave him a small smile. The kind that didn't belong here. Because now everything was clear. Not every detail. Not every connection. But the core of it. Intent. Once you see intent, everything else falls into place. And intent was no longer a question. It was fact. That was the moment everything changed. Not when I walked into the bedroom. Not when I saw Sophie in the ICU. But right here, when I stopped wondering what happened and started understanding why. Because from this point on, it wasn't about discovering the truth anymore. It was about proving it. And making sure, when it came out, there would be no way for him to escape it. By the 5th day, I stopped thinking like a wife and started thinking like someone building a case. Every movement mattered now. Every word. Every silence. Every time Daniel stepped out of the room with his phone in his hand and that same tight expression on his face. It wasn't random anymore. It was a pattern. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. That morning, he stood up again. I'll be back, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at him. I just waited. The door closed. 5 seconds. 10. Then I stood. Not quickly. Not suspiciously. Just enough to follow without being noticed. The hallway was quieter today. Or maybe I was just hearing it differently. He turned toward the stairwell. Of course he did. People always go where they think they won't be heard. I slowed my steps as I approached the corner. Then I heard his voice. Low. Controlled, but strained. I told you I'm working on it. Silence. Then, no. She doesn't know. Another pause. Longer this time. I held my breath without realizing it. You said I had more time? Time. There it was again. That word had started to follow everything. Deadlines. Pressure. Something already moving forward whether he was ready or not. I stepped back before he could turn. My pulse was steady. Not fast. Not panicked. Focused. Because now it was clear. Daniel wasn't just lying to me. He was answering to someone else. When I returned to the room, I made sure everything looked the same. Same position. Same stillness. Same quiet presence beside Sophie's bed. When he came back in, he glanced at me quickly. "What did I miss?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. And again, relief. That was the key. He needed to believe I was still behind. Because as long as he believed that, he would keep making mistakes. That afternoon, I asked him something simple. "Do you still have access to your work systems?" He frowned. "Yeah." "Why?" "I might need to look at some insurance stuff," I said. "Just to understand everything." "Logical. Reasonable. Harmless." He nodded slowly. "Okay." But his eyes lingered on me for a second too long. Suspicion. Good. That meant I was getting close. That night, the hospital grew quieter. The lights dimmed slightly, but never fully. Machines continued their steady rhythm. Sophie remained still. And Daniel, eventually, fell asleep in the chair. I waited. Not immediately. Patience mattered more than speed. When his breathing deepened, when his body finally relaxed, I moved. Carefully, I reached for his phone. The screen lit up softly. I didn't try to unlock it. Not yet. I didn't need to. Not yet. I looked at the notifications. Patterns. Names. And then I saw it. A contact saved as a single letter. L. Not Lauren. Just L. Hidden. Simplified. Designed not to draw attention. But it stood out now. Because I was looking for what didn't fit. I watched the screen. Waiting. And then it happened. A message preview flashed. "Did you send it?" My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. Send what? Money. Information. Something else. My mind moved quickly. The missing funds. The calls. The pressure. The timeline. This wasn't just debt. This wasn't just bad decisions. This was leverage. Someone had something on him. And they were using it. Blackmail. The word settled into place with a clarity that made everything colder. And Lauren, she wasn't just the affair. She was part of this. The connection. The bridge. The person who brought him into something he couldn't get out of. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been. No shift. No trace. Then I sat down again. Hands still. Breathing steady. Because now the picture was changing. Daniel wasn't just hiding something. He was trapped in something. Controlled. Directed. And that made him more dangerous. Not less. I looked at Sophie. Her small hand in mine. Still warm. Still here. And a new question formed. What had she seen? Because whatever it was, it had been enough to change everything. Enough to put her in this bed. Enough to push Daniel into panic. Enough to involve someone else entirely. The truth wasn't just hidden. It was being protected. By more than one person. By something structured. Something deliberate. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Calm. Still. But inside, everything had shifted again. Because now I wasn't just uncovering a lie. I was stepping into something bigger. And that meant one thing. I couldn't rush this. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. If I did, he would shut down. Erase everything. Disappear into whatever system he had gotten himself into. No, I needed him comfortable. Confident. Safe enough to believe he still had control. Because that's when people reveal the most. When they think they're ahead. When they think they've already won. I looked at him again. Sleeping. Unaware. And for the first time since this started, I didn't see my husband. I saw a piece of something larger. Something I was going to take apart. Layer by layer. Carefully. Completely. Because now there was no turning back. Not for him. And not for me. By the 6th day, I stopped waiting for something to happen. And started deciding what would happen next. There's a difference between reacting and directing. Reacting keeps you inside the problem. Directing forces everything to move toward you. And I needed that shift. Because now I knew enough. Not everything, but enough to understand the shape of it. Daniel wasn't just lying. He was under pressure. There was money involved. Deadlines. Someone on the other end of those calls? And Sophie? She had become part of that timeline. That was the line for me. Not the affair. Not the lies. But that... I looked at her hand in mine. Small. Still. And something inside me settled into place. Cold. Clear. Final. I wasn't trying to save anything anymore. I was going to end it. Completely. That morning, I turned to Daniel. You should get out for a bit. I said. He looked surprised. What? You've been here nonstop. I continued. You need air. He studied me, trying to understand why I would suggest that, why I wasn't questioning him, why I wasn't pushing. But exhaustion wins over suspicion. It always does. Yeah, he said slowly. Maybe for a bit. I nodded. I'll stay. That was step one. Create space. Because I couldn't build anything while he was watching every move I made. When he left, I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my phone, then my laptop, then everything I had access to. Bank records, archived emails, shared accounts, old documents I hadn't opened in months. I wasn't searching randomly. I was reconstructing. Timeline first. Always timeline. The day Sophie collapsed. The hours before. The gaps in Daniel's story. I aligned everything. Transactions. Call times. Message patterns. Absences. It started messy. Then it started to form. Money moved before calls. Calls happened before he left the room. He left the room before something else happened. Sequence. It wasn't clean, but it was consistent. And consistency is what turns suspicion into proof. Then I found something new. One of the routing numbers from the transfer. I searched it, cross-referenced it, and there it was. A business registration. Out of state. Minimal public information. Structured like a shell. Hidden. But not invisible. That changed everything. This wasn't personal. It wasn't just Daniel trying to fix his mistakes. This was organized. And he had stepped into it. Voluntarily or not. That part didn't matter anymore. What mattered was how to expose it. Because exposure was the only way out. I leaned back in my chair, thinking through the next move. Confrontation wouldn't work. He would deny everything. Delay everything. Destroy anything he could if he had time. No, I needed him comfortable. Confident. Safe enough to talk. Safe enough to slip. Safe enough to believe I was still behind him. Because that's when people reveal everything. When they think they're in control. That's when the idea came. Simple. Clean. Effective. A meeting. Not here. Not in the hospital. Not at home. Neutral ground. A place that feels safe. A place where people lower their guard. A restaurant. Dinner. Closure. The perfect illusion. But I couldn't just invite Daniel. I needed Lauren there. Because she wasn't just part of the affair. She was part of the system. And people like her, they talk when they feel safe. They reveal more than they should. That night, when Daniel returned, I made my move. I've been thinking, I said quietly. He looked at me carefully. That's usually not good. I almost smiled. Not yet. I don't want this to turn into something messy. I continued. Not with Sophie like this. That got his attention. It always comes back to the child. That's where people drop their guard. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying we should talk, I said. Properly. You, me, and her. His face changed. Subtle, but real. Tension. Fear. Then calculation. Why would we do that? He asked. Because I already know enough, I said softly. Not everything. Just enough to make him believe I did. That was the key. Silence filled the space between us. Heavy. Measured. Then he exhaled slowly. Fine, he said. One word. But it meant everything. Because now, He had stepped into my plan, not knowing it was one, not realizing he had just agreed to walk into something I controlled. I nodded. I'll set it up. Simple. Calm. Like it was nothing. Like it was closure. Like it was peace. But inside, everything had aligned. The evidence. The timeline. The people. All moving toward one point. One moment. One reveal. Because this wasn't about catching him anymore. That part was done. This was about making sure, when everything came out, there would be no way for him, or anyone connected to him, to walk away from it. The restaurant was quiet. Not empty, just controlled. Soft lighting. Low voices. The kind of place where people speak carefully. Like their words matter. Perfect. Because tonight, every word would matter. I arrived early. Of course I did. Control starts with positioning. I chose a table near the center. Not too exposed. Not too hidden. Visible enough to feel public. Private enough to feel safe. That balance mattered. People reveal more when they think they're protected, but not completely unseen. I ordered water and nothing else. Hands folded. Posture relaxed. From the outside, I looked like a woman trying to hold herself together. Inside, everything was already in motion. Daniel arrived first. 5 minutes early? That alone told me he was nervous. He scanned the room before approaching, his eyes moving quickly, calculating, looking for exits, looking for control. He didn't find it. Because tonight, there was none for him. "You got here early," he said, forcing a small smile as he sat down. "I like being prepared," I replied. Truth. Just not the kind he expected. Silence settled between us. Not awkward. Measured. He leaned forward slightly. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," he said. Careful. Testing me. Trying to see how much I knew. How much I suspected. How much I could handle. I held his gaze. "I'm ready." No hesitation. That unsettled him. I saw it in the way his shoulders tightened. Just slightly, Lauren arrived 10 minutes later. Composed? Confident. Too confident. She walked toward the table like she belonged there. Like she hadn't been dragged into something that could destroy her. That told me something important. She thought she was safe. Good. That made this easier. "Hi," she said, offering a polite smile as she sat down. No apology. No discomfort. Just professionalism. Like this was a meeting. Not the collapse of 3 lives. "Lauren," I said calmly. I watched her closely. Breathing. Eye movement. Posture. Everything mattered now. We ordered food. Normal behavior. That was part of the illusion. Let them settle. Let them believe this was manageable. That nothing irreversible had happened yet. Conversation started slowly. Safe topics. Surface level. Then Daniel took the lead. "I think we all know why we're here," he said. Lauren nodded slightly. Prepared. Aligned. They had talked before this. Agreed on their version. Of course they had. People like them always do. But prepared stories have one weakness. They don't bend well. "I'm not here to argue," I said softly. "I just want clarity." That word landed exactly where I needed it to. Clarity sounds safe. Fair. Neutral. It lowers defenses. Daniel relaxed slightly. Lauren leaned back in her chair. Good. They were settling in. Exactly as planned. "So let's start simple," I said. I looked directly at Daniel. "Walk me through the day Sophie got sick." The same question. Different setting. Higher stakes. He froze for a fraction of a second, then began. Same story. Same structure. Same careful wording. But this time, I wasn't just listening. I was comparing against everything I had already mapped. Every inconsistency stood out sharper here. More fragile. More obvious. Lauren watched him closely. Too closely. Like she was tracking his version, making sure it matched hers. That was the moment I needed. I turned to her. And you? Her smile faltered. Me? Yes. I kept my tone calm. You were with him that day? Weren't you? Silence. Daniel's head snapped toward her. That reaction alone confirmed it. Lauren hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. I don't think that's relevant, she said carefully. I nodded. It is. I leaned forward slightly. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just present. Focused. Because this was where everything began to shift. The illusion cracked. Control slipped. They just didn't realize it yet. Let's not complicate things, Daniel said quickly. Too quickly. Then don't, I replied. Silence again. He looked at me. Really looked this time. Trying to understand what had changed. Trying to find the version of me he thought he knew. It wasn't there anymore. Tell me something, I said softly. When exactly did you leave the house that afternoon? Another pause. Longer. More dangerous. Lauren shifted slightly in her seat. Uncomfortable now. The alignment between them was slipping. And once that happens, everything unravels. Daniel cleared his throat. I told you I was home. I held his gaze. No. You said you were home when it happened. A beat? That's not the same thing. Silence. The kind that presses down on everyone at the table. Lauren looked between us. Something in her expression changed. Not confidence anymore. Not control. Uncertainty. Daniel, she said quietly. What is she talking about? He didn't answer. And that was the moment the balance shifted completely. Because silence in the wrong place is louder than any confession. I leaned back in my chair. Calm, still, in control. And I watched them both. Because this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a collapse. Slow. Controlled. Inevitable. And they had just crossed the point where there was no going back. The moment didn't explode. It tightened, like something invisible pulling the air out of the room. One slow inch at a time. Daniel looked between me and Lauren. His expression shifting too quickly now. Confusion? Calculation. Fear. All fighting for control. What are you trying to say? He asked. Careful tone? Still trying to hold the edges together. Still believing this was something he could talk his way out of. I didn't answer right away. Silence. Deliberate. Because silence creates pressure. And pressure forces mistakes. I reached into my bag. Slowly. Deliberately. And placed a thin folder on the table. Not dramatic. Not heavy. Just enough. Daniel's eyes dropped to it immediately. Lauren didn't move at first. But her posture changed. Slight. Defensive. That was the first crack. I asked for clarity. I said calmly. So let me help with that. I opened the folder. Turned it toward them. The first page. Bank records. Highlighted transactions. Dates circled. Patterns laid out in a way that didn't need explanation. Daniel's face drained of color. Not all at once. But enough. That's not what you think, he said quickly. Too quickly. Always too quickly. I didn't respond. I turned the page. Second layer. Call logs. Timestamps aligned perfectly with the transfers. With his absences. With his lies. Lauren leaned forward now. Reading. Processing. Her confidence slipping. This proves nothing, she said. Her voice sharper than before. I nodded. You're right. And then I turned the next page. That's when everything shifted. Message transcripts. Not everything. Just enough. Names blurred. But context intact. Deadlines. Pressure. Instructions. Send it. Don't let her find out. You're running out of time. Daniel froze. Completely this time. Lauren's eyes widened. You said she didn't know, she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because in that moment, he realized something irreversible. He wasn't controlling anything anymore. I closed the folder gently. Let the silence sit. Let it grow. You needed money, I said softly, looking at him. No response. You got involved in something you couldn't control. His jaw tightened. Recognition. Truth landing where denial used to be. But then Sophie saw something. I continued. And that was the moment everything broke. Daniel's head snapped up. What? Lauren turned to him sharply. What is she talking about? He didn't answer. Again. And that silence. That was the confession. I leaned forward slightly. She wasn't supposed to be awake. Was she? Daniel's breathing changed. Faster. Uneven. Lauren pushed back in her chair. Daniel, she said, her voice no longer calm. What did you do? Still no answer. Because now, he wasn't choosing silence. He was trapped in it. The space between them shifted. Not subtle anymore. Broken. The alignment they walked in with, gone. Now it was just survival. Each of them trying to understand how much the other knew, how much they were exposed. I leaned back. Calm? Still. I'm done asking questions, I said. I already have the answers. Daniel looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as his wife. Not as someone he could manage. But as something else. Something he had underestimated. Something he couldn't control. What do you want? He asked. That question, that was the collapse. Because it meant he knew. He had lost. I didn't smile. Didn't raise my voice. Because this was never about anger. It was about outcome. I don't want anything, I said. A pause. For you. The word settled. Heavy. Final. Then it happened. A shift behind them. A presence. Daniel turned first. Slowly. And in that moment, his face went completely pale. Just like it had in the bedroom. Full circle. Lauren turned a second later. Her eyes widening as she saw what he saw. 2 officers stood a few steps away. Calm. Unmoved. Certain. Daniel Carter. One of them asked. No answer. Just silence. The kind that confirms everything. We need you to come with us. Simple words. Irreversible. Daniel stood slowly. Unsteady now. This is a misunderstanding, he said. His voice breaking. But even he didn't believe it. Not anymore. Not after everything that had just unfolded. The officer stepped closer. Not aggressive. Not rushed. Just final. Lauren looked between them. Between him. Between me? What is this? She asked. Her voice sharp. Almost desperate now. No one answered her. Because the story didn't belong to us anymore. It had moved beyond this table. Beyond this moment. Into something that couldn't be controlled. Daniel looked at me one last time. Searching. Not for forgiveness. Not for understanding. For something else. An exit. A way out. There wasn't one. There never had been. Because this had stopped being a situation he could fix the moment he lost control of the truth. The officer guided him away. Slow steps. Heavy. Final. And just like that, he was gone. Lauren didn't move. She sat there. Frozen. Like if she didn't move, this wouldn't be real. I stood up. No rush. No urgency. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I walked past her. Without a word. Because there was nothing left to say. Whatever she had chosen to be part of, she would face it now. Alone. Outside. The air felt different. Cooler. Sharper. Clear. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to it. Because the truth was no longer hidden. And once it's out, there's no putting it back. The night didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something had finally been set in motion. Outside the restaurant. The air was colder than I expected. Sharp. Clean. It cut through everything that had been building inside me for days. I stood there for a moment, not moving. Not because I didn't know what to do next, but because for the first time since all of this started, I didn't have to react. There was nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove. The truth had already stepped into the open, and it wasn't going back. The next morning, I went straight to the hospital. Same hallway. Same doors. Same quiet rhythm of machines. But something inside me had changed. Not lighter. Not yet. But steadier. More certain. When I walked into Sophie's room, the first thing I noticed was her hand. It moved. Just slightly. So small that I almost missed it. I froze. Then stepped closer. "Sophie," I whispered. Her fingers twitched again. And just like that, everything inside me broke. Not in panic. Not in fear. In release. Because that was the moment I had been holding on to without even realizing it. The moment where all of this, every lie, every step, every calculated decision, meant something. Days passed. Then weeks. The investigation moved forward. Quietly at first, then all at once. Daniel was formally charged. Not just for what happened to Sophie, but for everything connected to it. The money. The transfers. The network he had gotten involved with. Lauren didn't escape it either. Her role came out piece by piece. Not just the affair, but the connections, the introductions, the decisions she chose to be part of. Careers didn't end overnight. They collapsed. Slowly. Publicly. Irreversibly. And I watched it happen from a distance. Not with satisfaction. Not with anger. With clarity. Because this wasn't something I had created. I didn't destroy them. They built it themselves. I just stopped protecting it. Sophie recovered slowly. Not all at once. Not in some perfect moment where everything suddenly went back to normal. It was gradual. A hand squeeze. A blink. A word. Each step small, but real, until one morning, she looked at me and said, "Mom." And that was it. That was everything. I went back to teaching not long after. Same classroom. Same desks. Same noise. Students asking questions that didn't matter and everything at the same time. But I wasn't the same person standing in front of them. Because I understood something now that I didn't before. Strength isn't loud. It's not in the moment you react. It's not in how fast you fight back. Real strength is knowing when to stay still, when to watch, when to let people reveal exactly who they are without interrupting them. I used to think silence meant weakness. Now I know silence can be control. Observation can be power. And patience. Patience can change everything. Because when you stop reacting, you start seeing, and when you start seeing, you stop being controlled by what's happening to you. You start controlling what happens next. I look back at that moment in the bedroom sometimes. The door. The silence. His face going pale. At the time, I thought it was fear of being caught. Now I understand. It was fear of what was already coming. Because the truth doesn't need to be forced. It only needs space. And once it has that, it surfaces on its own. If you've ever been in a situation where something didn't feel right, where the story didn't match the behavior, where people tried to make you question what you were clearly seeing, trust that instinct. It's there for a reason. And sometimes, the moment you stop reacting emotionally is the moment you start taking control. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever faced betrayal, manipulation, or had to stay strong when everything around you was falling apart, I'd really like to hear your story. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done. And if you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Make sure you stay here. Because there are more stories like this, real, raw, and about taking your power back, coming next. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.